The world had never been so quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy silence that comes after screams fade away and cities burn. Earth, the cradle of humanity, lay wounded. Smoke rose from broken capitals. Oceans boiled from falling weapons, and the sky itself looked bruised with ash. It had happened so quickly. 1 week the people of Earth lived their lives as normal, working, laughing, dreaming. The next week the stars themselves had betrayed them. Out of the black void came a fleet unlike anything humans had ever seen. Gigantic ships, jagged and cold, drifting with the weight of an empire that had crushed many before. They did not speak. They did not explain. They simply opened fire. Earth's defense fleet was strong by human standards, but compared to the invaders, it was nothing. Ships that took decades to build were destroyed in minutes. Generals shouted orders, pilots fought with all their courage, but courage was not enough. One by one, Earth's proud vessels became burning wrecks falling through the atmosphere. Billions watched from the ground as the sky turned into a battlefield. Children clung to their mothers while fathers clenched fists of helpless rage. Whole cities vanished under storms of plasma fire. Satellites fell like meteors, leaving trails of fire across the night. For the first time in human history, the people of Earth truly felt small before the vastness of the galaxy. And yet, even in the ruins, there was no surrender. Underground bunkers hummed with activity. Hidden command centers buried beneath mountains lit up with the red glow of emergency lights. Soldiers and civilians crowded into shelters whispering prayers or curses. The world above them was dying, but the will inside them was not. In one of these hidden chambers deep beneath the shattered capital of Geneva, a lone figure sat before a recording terminal. His name was Admiral Elias Ward, commander of what little remained of Earth's defense fleet. His uniform was torn, the once bright silver insignia darkened with soot. Blood traced a thin line across his cheek. His eyes, though weary, burned with a fire brighter than any alien weapon. Around him, officers argued, trying to plan impossible defenses. Some wanted to retreat into deep space. Others begged to send out pleas for mercy. Ward silenced them all with a single raised hand. "No," he said softly, though the word carried weight. "They didn't come here for peace. They came to erase us, to end Earth itself. If we beg, they will laugh. If we hide, they will hunt us. There is only one thing we can give them now. A promise." The officers fell silent. In that moment, they understood. Earth was dying. The cities were already gone, the fleets destroyed, but humanity was not finished. "Not yet." Ward leaned forward and began to record. His voice was steady, his gaze unbroken. He did not speak to his officers nor to the scattered survivors. He spoke to the invaders themselves. He spoke to history. "This is Admiral Ward of the Terran Defense Command," he said, each word echoing in the small chamber. "You believe Earth is finished. You think this war will end with our ashes scattered among the stars. But you are wrong." A pause followed. The room seemed to grow colder, as though even the machines listened. "You lit the fire of this war, and for that you will pay. Even if Earth falls, humanity will endure. And when we rise again, we will bring the storm to your worlds. Remember my words. The blood you spilled here will be the chains that drag you into ruin." Those words were sent out across every frequency, the last clear transmission from Earth, carried on broken satellites and damaged relays echoing into the stars. The aliens heard it and mocked it. But the survivors who scattered across colonies and stations did not hear weakness. They heard defiance. And so in the ruins of Earth, amid the silence before the storm, a seed was planted. The seed of vengeance. The war was not over. It had only just begun. The recording chamber was quiet after Admiral Elias Ward finished speaking. The officers around him looked pale, some with tears in their eyes, others with jaws clenched in fury. No one doubted the truth of his words. Earth was lost, but humanity was not. The Admiral's voice had captured what they all felt but could not say aloud. Grief mixed with unbreakable defiance. Ward sat back in his chair, exhausted. The walls shook faintly from distant bombardments above ground. He knew time was short. The enemy fleet was not slowing down. They were hunting every remaining pocket of resistance, but his message was not for today. It was for tomorrow. For the survivors who would carry the fight long after Earth was gone. "Send it," Ward ordered. His voice was rough but steady. "Broadcast on every channel. Use every relay we still have. Let them hear us no matter where they are hiding in the stars." The technicians obeyed, their fingers flying across control panels. Broken satellites in orbit caught the signal. bouncing it into deep space. Damaged relay stations, even those on the edge of destruction, repeated the transmission with dying strength. Across the galaxy, the word spread like wildfire. On Mars, miners huddled in underground tunnels heard the Admiral's voice crackle through static. On Europa, scientists inside icy domes paused their work and listened in silence. On distant trade routes, freighter crews froze as the message cut across their navigation screens. Everywhere it was heard, it carried the same power. It was not despair. It was not surrender. It was a vow. The alien fleets heard it too. Their commanders replayed the recording in their war councils, sneering at the humans' arrogance. To them, Earth was already broken, its armies defeated, its cities burning. How could a dying species threaten them? But hidden beneath their laughter was a faint unease. There was something dangerous in the way the humans spoke, something that did not sound like weakness. Meanwhile, among humanity, the effect was like fire touching dry wood. Colonists who had once felt hopeless now stood tall. Soldiers who thought of laying down their weapons tightened their grips instead. Children who had lost their parents memorized Ward's words as if they were sacred. The last transmission was no longer just a message. It was a promise carved into every survivor's heart. Admiral Ward himself did not see the impact. His bunker would not last much longer. Above, the alien bombardment was tearing apart the surface. Whole continents burned. But he did not care for survival anymore. His duty had been fulfilled. He had given his people more than orders. He had given them a reason to fight. Hours later, the alien forces found the bunker. By then, Ward and his command staff were gone, their fate sealed with Earth's ashes. Yet the message had already escaped, carried far beyond their reach. In the weeks that followed, it spread faster than any fleet could travel. Smugglers replayed it in spaceports. Rebel fighters blasted it from hidden bases. Civilians whispered it to one another as if it were a prayer. It crossed languages, borders, and even planets. Wherever humanity lived, the voice of defiance reached them. And as the survivors listened again and again, something awoke in them. They no longer thought only of what they had lost. They thought of what must come next: vengeance, justice, survival. The aliens had meant to erase a world. Instead, they had created an unbreakable will. A single voice, trembling yet fierce, had turned despair into determination. And so, across the scattered colonies and shattered fleets, a new truth was born. Humanity would never forgive, and they would never forget. The last transmission was no longer only Admiral Ward's words. It had become the voice of all mankind. The fall of Earth did not mean the end of humanity. The enemy believed one planet was all that mattered, but humanity had already spread far beyond their home. Colonies, mining stations, research outposts, and trade hubs dotted the stars. Some were small, little more than clusters of families clinging to survival on barren rocks. Others were larger, thriving worlds with cities and industries. When the news of Earth's destruction reached them, grief spread like a tidal wave. People dropped what they were doing and wept openly. On Mars, the red desert seemed emptier than ever as colonists stood in silence, staring at the night sky where their home once shone like a bright star. On Titan, workers inside thick domes struck the walls in rage, their voices echoing through steel corridors. In deep space, traders received the broadcast and sat motionless at their controls, unable to believe that the heart of humanity was gone. But despair did not last. The last transmission from Admiral Ward began to spread across every colony and outpost. The words repeated endlessly, carried by old satellites, broken radios, and even whispered by mouth when technology failed. Wherever it reached, the effect was the same. On Mars, miners who had once felt powerless raised their heads. They began turning their heavy drills and cargo haulers into makeshift weapons. They swore to build ships even from scrap, to take the fight back to the stars. On Titan, scientists and engineers stopped their research and instead began reprogramming cargo freighters into war frigates. They stripped engines, reinforced hulls, and mounted weapons wherever they could. The colony that once sent supplies now prepared to send soldiers. On frontier worlds where farmers lived under strange suns, entire families stood together in oath. They may not have warships or weapons, but they had determination. They trained with whatever tools they had, rifles, blades, even sharpened farming equipment, promising that their children would never forget what was done to Earth. The last transmission became something more than a speech. It became a flag for those who had no FEO. Lag. It became a fire that burned in every human heart. The aliens had destroyed Earth, but they had not destroyed humanity's will. Instead, they had scattered it across the stars where it grew stronger. Among the colonies, stories began to spread. Stories of resistance fighters ambushing enemy patrols. Stories of human smugglers stealing alien weapons and delivering them to hidden bases. Stories of ordinary people too weak alone, standing together as something unstoppable. Everywhere, people repeated Admiral Ward's words. "You lit the fire of this war, and for that you will pay." Children memorized those lines before they even learned to read. Soldiers carved them into the walls of their bunkers. Pilots whispered them before flying into battle. Humanity was no longer fighting only for survival. They were fighting for vengeance. The aliens, watching from their vast empires, underestimated what was happening. They believed Earth's fall had ended the war. To them, humanity was just another weak species broken beneath their might. But the truth was different. The destruction of Earth had not ended humanity. It had transformed them. No longer were they simply explorers, traders, or colonists. Now they were survivors of a burned homeworld. Every human carried that scar, and every human carried that fire. The scattered survivors were no longer just people living in space. They were the children of Earth's ashes, bound together by one unshakable promise: to fight until the galaxy remembered never to touch them again. The aliens thought they had killed a world. In truth, they had created an army that stretched across the stars, and so the survivors lifted their eyes toward the night sky. They did not see only darkness. They saw targets. They saw the future. They saw the path to vengeance. The first strike did not come from a grand fleet or a mighty army. It came from a handful of broken people who had lost everything. They were miners, engineers, traders, and soldiers, survivors who had nothing left to fear. They called themselves the Vengeance Crew, though the galaxy would later give them another name, the First Retaliators. They began with a stolen alien vessel. Captured during a desperate skirmish near a mining station, the ship was damaged, its systems unfamiliar, but the survivors learned quickly. Human hands rewired alien controls, human minds studied the enemy engines, and human rage filled every gap where knowledge failed. What they could not understand, they broke apart and rebuilt with their own machines. The ship became a symbol, patched together with alien steel and human determination. It was not beautiful, but it was dangerous. And inside it, 50 men and women swore an oath. If humanity was to fall, then they would fall fighting. Their target was not random. They aimed for the enemy's lifeblood in their supply lines. Without food, fuel, and materials, even the greatest empire would starve. The first retaliators traveled deep into alien territory, slipping past patrols, hiding in asteroid fields, and shutting down their engines to drift like shadows. Their first strike came at a supply depot orbiting a gas giant. The aliens never expected humans to come so far so soon. The retaliators emerged from the planet's shadow, weapons blazing. Cargo ships exploded, station defenses collapsed, and the aliens scattered in panic. By the time reinforcements arrived, the humans were already gone, leaving only wreckage and fire behind. The galaxy trembled. The invaders mocked the attack in their broadcasts, calling it a desperate act by a dying species. But beneath their arrogance, doubt grew. How could broken survivors strike so deep so fast? The first retaliators did not stop. They attacked again, this time at a shipyard. Alien cruisers under construction were torn apart before they ever touched the stars. Engineers and workers fled as the human ship cut through the docks like a predator in a herd. Once again, the retaliators vanished into the void before the enemy could trap them. Each attack carried a message. Before leaving, they broadcast Admiral Ward's last transmission. Across alien channels, his voice repeated, "You lit the fire of this war, and for that you will pay." The enemy laughed at the words, but their laughter grew weaker each time. Even in victory, their commanders could not sleep peacefully. Somewhere in the dark, humans were watching, waiting, and striking. Back in the colonies, the effect was electrifying. News of the raids spread faster than light. Survivors who once felt powerless now saw proof that humanity could fight back. Children played games pretending to be the retaliators. Young men and women signed up to join resistance fleets. Old engineers offered their skills to build new weapons. The scattered survivors no longer felt like scattered pieces. They felt like sparks gathering into a firestorm. The first retaliators knew their mission was suicide. Their stolen ship was old, damaged, and hunted by fleets far stronger than they could face. And eventually the inevitable happened. In the nebula of Carthos, alien warships trapped them. Surrounded and outgunned, the humans fought until their vessel was nothing but flames and debris. None survived, but their deaths were not in vain. In their final battle, they destroyed 3 enemy cruisers, crippled a carrier, and sent one last broadcast into the stars. The Admiral's words, repeated once more, became the Retaliator's dying roar. And with that roar, humanity's war truly began. The aliens thought Earth was finished. They thought humanity would fade into history like so many others before. But the first Retaliators proved the truth. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was everywhere. Humanity was fighting back. The galaxy had seen the beginning of something new, the birth of human vengeance. Years passed, and humanity did not fade. Instead, they grew stronger. What began as small acts of resistance turned into organized fleets. Colonies that once feared the alien empire now worked day and night to build weapons. Every survivor carried the memory of Earth's fall, and that memory became fuel for their determination. The last transmission never faded. It echoed in every human heart. Children who were born after Earth's destruction learned it as their first lesson. Soldiers carved it into their armor. Captains played it before battle, reminding their crews what they were fighting for. The message had become more than words. It was the soul of humanity. At first, the humans had only stolen ships and improvised weapons. But over the years, they learned. They studied alien technology, adapting it to their own. They improved it, reshaped it, and combined it with human ingenuity. Engines became faster. Shields became stronger. Weapons became sharper. What once looked like scattered colonies now began to resemble a hidden empire, forged in fire and loss. The aliens did not notice at first. To them, humans were pests, annoying, stubborn, but unimportant. They laughed at every raid, every ambush. But as the years turned into decades, their laughter grew uneasy. Human strikes became more precise. Human ships began to appear in greater numbers. What had been tiny sparks now grew into a firestorm that spread. Across the stars, the first sign of, the true turning tide came at the Battle of Vega. An alien fleet of 20, warships expected to crush a human uprising. Instead, they were ambushed by a fleet twice their size. The humans had arrived in warships of their own design, sleek and deadly. The battle raged for hours, but when the smoke cleared, the alien fleet was gone. Humanity had claimed its first great victory. Across the colonies, people celebrated. For the first time since Earth's fall, hope shone brighter than fear. Humanity was no longer running. Humanity was advancing. The aliens, however, were shaken. Their empire had conquered countless species, but none had ever fought back like this. Humans were different. They did not give up. They did not kneel. They carried their pain like a weapon, and they sharpened it with every passing year. Decades turned into generations. Children grew up knowing only war, and they grew fierce. Entire families dedicated themselves to the cause, sending sons and daughters to fight among the stars. Every colony became a fortress, every outpost a training ground. Humanity had lost its homeworld, but in return it gained something greater: unity. When the united human fleet was finally formed, it was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Thousands of ships, some human-built, some alien-stolen, all bearing the mark of vengeance. At the center of the fleet flew a single banner, black with a burning star, symbolizing Earth's death and humanity's unending fire. Their target was no longer supply depots or small patrols. Their eyes were set on the heart of the alien enemy. Pyre. The humans would not rest until the enemy paid for every life taken, every city burned, every child buried under fire. The galaxy watched in silence as the human fleet began its march. Other species, long enslaved by the aliens, began to whisper. They had thought resistance was impossible, but now they saw humans rising not just to survive but to conquer. The aliens, once proud and unchallenged, now knew fear. The tide of war had turned. Humanity was no longer scattered survivors. They were the storm Admiral Ward had promised, and that storm was heading straight for the enemy's homeworld. The alien homeworld trembled under the shadow of the human fleet. Thousands of ships, carrying generations of grief, loss, and fury, approached in perfect formation. The once mighty empire had fought countless wars, but none like this. Humanity was different. Humanity did not fight for power or greed. Humanity fought for something they had lost: their home, their families, and their honor. From the bridge of the flagship Terran Vindicator, Admiral Leora Kane watched the approaching planet. She was the great-granddaughter of those who had survived Earth's fall. Every scar on her face, every line on her hands told the story of a species forged in fire. Around her, captains and pilots readied their crews. They did not speak much. Words were unnecessary. Each human aboard knew why they were here. Each carried the echo of the last transmission. The aliens sent diplomats first, hoping to buy time. Holographic messages flickered across the fleet, offering treaties, reparations, even surrender of minor systems. Their leaders pleaded with Kane personally, their voices trembling. But she did not answer immediately. She remembered Earth, cities burning, children crying, billions lost. She remembered Admiral Ward's words, his defiance, and the promise that had carried across the stars. "No," she said at last. Her voice was calm but firm. "You thought Earth's silence meant death. But Earth speaks through us. We are its last transmission. You lit the fire of this war. And now you will pay," the fleet advanced. At first, the aliens responded with defensive fire. Massive energy beams streaked across space, tearing apart human frigates and cruisers. Explosions blossomed like deadly fireworks in the void. But humans had prepared. Every strike was calculated, every move precise. Decades of adaptation, stolen technology, and unbreakable will turned into perfect coordination. Human ships swarmed around the alien armada like a living storm. Shields held against impossible odds. Weapons struck at weak points the aliens did not know existed. Entire squadrons were lost, yes, but every loss became a lesson, every failure a step closer to victory. The enemy's confidence began to crumble. They had underestimated humanity's patience, humanity's cunning, and humanity's fury. Across the galaxy, those who had survived the first attacks of the humans watched in awe. Planets that had been silent now echoed with the names of human heroes. The first retaliators generations later became legends. Entire systems whispered stories of humans who never gave up, humans who turned death into power, humans who carried the memory of Earth like a weapon. As the battle reached the planet's surface, the alien capital burned. Cities once thought untouchable collapsed under the relentless human assault. Leaders hid, generals were captured, and fleets scattered. Humanity did not pause. There was no celebration yet. There was only purpose. Justice for Earth demanded the complete end of this empire. Kane's voice came again across the fleet's intercom, steady and commanding. "Remember why we fight. Remember Earth. Remember Ward. Remember every life they tried to erase. This is our reckoning." By the end of the day, the alien empire was in chaos. Its leaders begged for mercy, offering surrender after surrender. But humanity remembered the ashes of their home, the billions lost, and the children buried under fire. There would be no mercy. There would be no compromise. And so the human fleet did not merely win. It shattered the empire. It erased the arrogance of those who thought they could erase a world. Humanity had returned not as survivors, but as conquerors. Not for power, but for justice. Not for greed, but for memory. And in the hearts of every human, the last transmission burned brighter than ever. A promise fulfilled. A vow kept. A fire that would never die. The reckoning was complete. The alien homeworld lay in ruins. Smoke rose from shattered cities, and oceans boiled where weapons had struck. The once great empire, feared across countless systems, had fallen. And yet silence reigned across the galaxy. A different kind of silence than the one humanity had known when Earth fell. This silence was heavy with victory, with the weight of a promise fulfilled. On the surface of the shattered capital, a human officer stood alone. Captain Arik Voss looked out over the smoking ruins, feeling the pulse of the galaxy beneath his feet. Around him, human soldiers secured the area. The enemy had surrendered, their leaders captured or fleeing, but Voss knew this moment was more than victory. It was a message, a voice that must reach every star. He activated the communications array, a fragile structure that had survived the bombardment. Signals leapt into the void, broadcasting across light years, reaching planets that had once been silent under alien control. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of centuries: grief, vengeance, and triumph. "This is humanity," Voss said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. "You tried to erase us. You thought that burning Earth, killing billions, and scattering our people would end our story. But Earth speaks through us. Its voice echoes in every survivor, in every fleet, in every child born after its fall. You cannot silence it." He paused, letting the words sink. Behind him, soldiers looked to the horizon, some with tears in their eyes. They had trained, fought, and sacrificed everything for this moment. The memory of their lost home burned in each heart like fire, and now that fire had become a beacon. "Remember the last transmission?" Voss continued. "Admiral Ward's warning was not just a message. It was a promise. You lit the fire of this war, and we carried it across the stars. We swore vengeance, and we kept that oath. Humanity will never be weak again. Humanity will never be forgotten. And from this day forward, no one will ever dare ignite war with us without paying the price." Across the galaxy, the broadcast reached hidden colonies, orphaned children, and survivors in the most distant outposts. They heard not only words but the echo of a promise kept. The last transmission had begun as a warning, become a vow, and now it was a declaration. Humanity had returned to strong, united, and unstoppable. Captain Voss looked back once more at the ruins. The destruction was immense, and yet it was also a reminder of what had been lost. Earth was gone, but its spirit lived on in every human. Every ship, every fleet, every survivor carried the memory of their home, and they carried it into the future. He thought of Admiral Ward, of the first retaliators, and of countless unnamed humans who had fought and died so that others could live. Their voices had not been lost. They were the foundation of humanity's resurgence, the sparks that lit the storm. Voss lowered the communicator, letting the silence of space wash over him. But the silence was no longer empty. It was full of purpose, full of strength, full of life. Humanity had endured the unthinkable. Humanity had risen from ashes. Humanity had made the galaxy remember. And somewhere in the stars, perhaps on distant worlds that had once been under alien rule, civilizations paused to listen. They had seen a species rise from extinction, wielding pain and loss as power. They had heard the voice of a planet that would never be silenced. "This is humanity," Voss said one last time, almost to himself. "The last transmission was not the end. It is the beginning, and we will never stop speaking." The signal ended, but the message did not fade. Across the void, in every corner of the galaxy, the story of Earth and its children spread. Fear replaced arrogance in those who had sought to destroy humanity. Respect replaced doubt, and hope, tempered by sorrow and courage, burned brighter than ever. From that day forward, the galaxy knew one truth above all. To ignite war with humanity was to invite a storm that would never end. Earth was gone, but humanity had spoken, and the last transmission would echo forever.